you all for showing up today, and I will be speaking of Prophetic Ragnarssons from Old Norse mythology, strange births and childhoods in Heroes Saga. And this is a presentation that I built for the International Congress of Medieval Studies in Kalamazoo this year, but it was canceled, so you all are getting to hear it instead. So the Saga of Ragnar Loðbrok and other medieval works, which include parts of this historico-mythic character's story, reveal interesting links between Norse mythology and that of other Indo-European groups. Specifically, the prophetic wife of Ragnar, Aslaug, and their children together, Ivar the Boneless and Sigurd Snake in the Eye, have stories linked to them which place them firmly within the larger mythological pattern. For example, both sons portray certain characteristics which are found in the Greek gods Hephaestus and Hermes. The strange births of Ivar the Boneless and Sigurd Snake in the Eye to Aslaug and Ragnar exemplify prophetic and deformed births of mythological figures throughout, revealing an interesting attitude in Norse culture towards those with handicaps. To better interpret Norse culture in the early Middle Ages, this paper will outline the characteristics of Aslaug, Ivar, and Sigurd in relation to children, deformity, and magic, both of the prophetic and uncanny kinds in Norse saga. We have several sources for the 9th century story of Ragnar Loðbrok and his family, dating to the 13th century to the 19th century, which draw on oral traditions. Here we will focus on the version found within the 14th century saga of Ragnar Loðbrok, a version derived from older source material. Though we now might be familiar with the dashing and daring Ragnar from the popular History Channel TV show Vikings, the medieval versions show a plethora of characteristics within the historico-mythic hero. The Saga of Ragnar Loðbrok, Ragnar is portrayed as the typical masculine archetype, with little cunning or guile, but much strength of arms and brutal mindedness. His wife and sons exemplifying the more clever aspects of a hero, though in other versions it is Ragnar who is depicted as both wily and strong. His sons, Ivar and Sigurd, received their gifts of extreme cunning and uncanny preternatural magics from their mother, Aslaug, and her parents, Sigurd Fafnirsbane and Brunhild the Valkyrie. So to tell this story thoroughly, the maternal grandparents of Ivar and Sigurd must quickly be examined. The maternal grandfather, Sigurd Fafnirsbane, received his epithet by killing the dragon Fafnir, shown in the runestone image here. As told in the Saga of the Volsungs, these two sagas were paired together in the oldest manuscript we still possess of either, MS NKS 1824b, which dates to about 1400 AD. It seems that this connection between the two stories gradually arose from the close association of characteristics between both male and female protagonists, as well as a movement in the mid-13th century of re-Scandinavization of the Sigurd story in response to the composition of Thithorik's saga in Bergen. The older story of the Volsungs would likely have been told first by a skald or read in later iterations, then followed with the younger saga of Ragnar, possibly on the next night of a multi-feasting event. However, Carolyn Larrington argues that these pieces are not drukompontier in style or ideology, but rather influence one another, especially in the employment of romance lexis and tropes. This contention of method and storytelling will be explored further as we discuss this myth. Ragnar's wife Aslaug is also introduced in this prequel saga, as she is given away as a child by her mother Brunhild, who likely did so to protect Aslaug from those who would use this child of the famous parentage for their own gain. Brunhild is not only royalty and sister-in-law to Atli, who's usually identified as Attila the Hun, but she is also known to fight in battle and receive prophetic dreams. By comparing the talents of the maternal grandparents with those of Ivar and Sigurd, we can see a clear connection in these stories through inherited supernatural powers and traits, while other tales, such as Gesta Danorum, the tales of Ragnar's sons, and Krakumal, do not always follow the same traditions found in the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, there are certain motifs which pervade the narrative, which we will explore further. Beginning with Aslaug the Volva. Aslaug, the second wife of Ragnar, gave birth to several sons, but her most intriguing scions were the two she prophesied the births of, Ivar and Sigurd. Aslaug's affinity for prophecy and level-headed wisdom combined with Ragnar's strength of arms produced two children who both have deformities, but also proved to be formidable warriors and leaders of their people, as both sons unite their parents' formidable powers of mind and body. Aslaug's own birth was also a bit strange, as she was a love child, born out of wedlock, then given up to a warrior guardian, then to foster parents to be raised, a common Indo-European motif which usually is used in male stories. These foster parents were poor farmers who renamed her Kraka, meaning crow, seemingly to attempt to disguise her uncanny beauty which she possessed even as a young girl, with an ugly name. This beauty would eventually lead Aslaug to her fated meeting with Ragnar. From Ragnar and Aslaug's first meeting, themes of prophecy and predilection pervade the narrative. When traveling abroad from his kingdom, Ragnar's men came across the beautiful daughter of a poor farmer and his hideous wife. The young woman's name is given as Kraka. However, the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok would likely have been read, or rather listened to, immediately after completion of the Volsung Saga, which introduces Aslaug as the daughter of Sigurd Fafnersbane and Brunhild. The audience would know the lineage of Aslaug, while the characters in the story were ignorant, as Kraka knew nothing of her true parentage yet, and neither did Ragnar and his men. Though she does not have a deformity in the traditional sense of its meaning, her enchanting beauty could be interpreted as a kind of handicap. Her foster mother Green both changed her name to Kraka and forbid her from bathing, possibly in an attempt to hide her from predatory men. However, Kraka bathed herself when she saw Ragnar's ship in the harbor, and she came back home so beautiful that Ragnar's men could not help but look at her, to the point of burning bread Ragnar had ordered them to make. Though her deformity is perceived as the opposite, Aslaug's beauty is the cause of her finding her destiny. I think this piece of digital artwork, Kraka, by Gunn Legler, from 2013, exemplifies this juxtaposition quite well, both beautiful and seemingly misshapen. Aslaug's magical powers seem to be inherited rather than learned, as Grima, her foster mother, is not shown to be of any kind of seeress or vulva, so Aslaug's powers were passed to her by her magnificent heritage. As the daughter of Sigurd Fafnersbane and Brunhild the Valkyrie, she was granted many supernatural powers. She shows uncanny cunning in solving the riddle which Ragnar poses to her before their first meeting, then again when refusing to have sex with Ragnar before they marry. Her wisdom truly shows itself when she prophesies to Ragnar that if he has sex with her before waiting a period of time after their marriage, their son will be born with no bones. Ragnar ignores her warning and telling her that she is no seeress, and forces his desire upon her. Their firstborn, Ivar, is then born without bones in his legs, just as Aslaug prophesied, but this does not prove anything to her lineage, which she is still unaware of. It is not until Ragnar is about to take another seemingly higher status wife, a princess of Sweden, that Aslaug has a prophetic revelation that she is the daughter of Sigurd Fafnersbane. To stop Ragnar from marrying this other woman, Aslaug foretells that her next son to be born, which she already carries, will have the image of a snake in his eye to prove her vaunted lineage. When this comes to pass and Sigurd Snake in the Eye is born, Ragnar gives up his ambition to take a royal wife, as Aslaug has the greatest heritage of all, being a Volsung, the daughter of a hero and a heroine. Aslaug finally takes her true name, shedding Kraka in the guise of humble origins, to rule beside Ragnar as his only wife. After the death of two of Ragnar's sons from his first wife, Aslaug takes yet another name, Randalin, and aids her sons in leading their men into battle against the Swedes, showing her proclivity to battle, which she inherited from both her mother and father, as well as connecting her to the woman warrior motif, which we find in Indo-European mythology. Ivar the Boneless. Ivar was born with gristle where the bones would be, and so received his epithet, the boneless, Beinlaus in Old Norse. This event is not only attested in manuscript 1824b, but also Hatalikil from the mid-12th century and Chronicon Roskildense from 1140. However, Ivar was also considered to be the handsomest of all men and wise beyond all of his brothers. Even while he was young, he was considered to be very tall, though he was carried around on a stretcher or shield because he could not walk. Though the Greek Hephaestus is described quite differently in Greek myth, there are certain similarities in that they both were crippled in their legs but were strong of arm. A point I would certainly like to further explore in my research is where in other Indo-European mythology do we find crippled heroes and gods? We certainly find a plethora of cows both in Sanskrit and Irish mythology, but to further this research in the future, I would like to investigate these oral traditions' interconnectivity further. However, for the moment, I will show the parallels within the Latin poem the Aeneid and the saga when concerning Ivar. In the Aeneid, Queen Dido is described as purchasing the area known as Bursa, meaning hide, from the local Libyan tribes. She is allowed to have as much land as a bull hide can encompass. From this, scholars infer that she cut the hide into strips and stretched them out to cover the large area which became the city of Carthage. Ivar is described as doing something very similar in England after the death of his father, when negotiating for land with the English king Ella. Ivar went and got a hide from an old bull, and he gave orders for the hide to be sawed and stretched 3 times. Then he had it cut into the thinnest possible strips, and he had the hair side split from the flesh side. When this was done, it formed a string so long that it was amazing to look at. No one had imagined that it would come out so long. Then he gave orders for it to be spread across a certain plain, and there were such vast lands there that it could have held a large city. Then he gathered together several skilled builders and ordered many houses to be built on this plain, as well as a large city that is called London. These 2 instances of city founding share such similarities that I cannot see how Dido's Ivar stories do not have a relation of some kind, whether that be a shared Indo-European motif or direct influence from Carthage to London's foundings. Though the story in the saga is obviously not historical, as Llandonium was founded during the Roman occupation of Britain, it does show the mythological connections to either known literature or lost oral traditions. As the eldest of Auslog's brood, Ivar claimed supremacy over his brothers and led them in whatever they attempted. While still a very young man, Ivar led his brothers in sacking the settlement of Hedeby, a feat even their father had failed to achieve. Led into battle upon a shield, Ivar was a gifted bowman, even with the power to slay a pair of magical steers, which frightened the rest of his army with their magical moos, a motif we find similarities within Irish mythology, which is part of my further research I hope Dr. MacDonald can guide me in. Rather than falling into indolence because of his handicap, Ivar proves to be a formidable leader whom both his brothers are willing to follow as he continually urges them to action. Heading into battle with the Swedes, Ivar urges, "Carry me at the head of the troops, brothers, boneless as I am, so that I can use both my hands in our battle for vengeance." If we include historical sources about Ivar in this analysis, we can see that he went on to become one of the greatest Viking konungar, or general kings, of the 9th century, conquering much of northern England and possibly Ireland. However, scholars are skeptical of this connection between the mythical and the historical Ivar. I would argue that rather than completely separating the two, as a comparative mythologist, we can envision the historical Ivar as possibly using the motif of the skaldic poetry Ivar to build upon his own reputation, which then circles back around to influence the skaldic poetry as it continued to evolve to the point of its written form. Despite his deformity, or rather because of it, Ivar is still remembered today. This can be seen in the last few seasons of the TV show Vikings, which portray him as a leader of Ragnarssons after his death, as well as in the Last Kingdom TV show and book series by Bernard Cornwell, which also include mention of Ivar the Boneless as the leader of Vikings invading Ireland. The truth of Ivar's myth cannot be known. However, the prolific depictions of this famous warrior from the medieval era to today prove that the long shadow of this crippled warrior will not be forgotten anytime soon. Norse culture has a unique way of viewing deformities in their leaders. Where a poor man who was crippled had little place within Norse society, a leader with deformity could be accepted and revered if their other talents proved their prowess. Next, we'll discuss Sigurd's snake in the eye. Sigurd's birth was also surrounded in prophecy, as Aslog foretold the strange image which would be found in her son's eye, confirming her own heritage. She then named her son with the mark of her father after him to further cement her claim to dragon-slaying heritage. Ragnar also was a dragon slayer, but he seemed to accept that this deformity in Sigurd's eye was confirmation of her prophecy. Sigurd would go on to develop mentally extremely quickly, as it is he who convinced his brothers and mother with eloquent wit and prophetic poetry to make war upon the Swedes at the age of only 3 years old, saying, "If you are worried, mother, it will take 3 nights to make the navy ready. We have a long voyage ahead. If our swords are good, Einstein will no longer be king in Uppsala, no matter how much he has sacrificed." Sigurd is able to turn Ivar's mind to his will, even though Ivar has taken up leadership of their house after their father is wandering the seas and raiding. This anecdote shows how these sons of Ragnar with Aslog are more than mere men, growing up more quickly and possessing skills which common men would lack at such an extremely early age. It seems that his maternal grandfather passed down many of these traits, as he is described in the Volsung saga. Sigurd Fafnersbane far excelled others in fine manners, in all the social graces, well nigh in everything. He could speak long and eloquently, and if he started a speech, he never stopped until everyone saw that his way was the only way possible. Some scholars believe that this courtly manner is entirely born from French romance via the 13th and 14th centuries, and that these two sagas, along with Saxo Grammaticus Gesta Danorum, are a battleground between southern effeminization and northern traditional heroic values. However, looking at the wider Indo-European context, this kind of eloquent argumentation can also be found in abundance, especially in female context, such as Draupadi from the Mahabharata at her wedding, Godafarid from Ferdowsi's Shahlameh after she is defeated in battle against Sorhab, and Vasilisa Mukulashina from the Vini about Starver Godinovich. So rather than a southern French effeminization, this turn from the quintessential barbarian Viking motif could lie within a much older Indo-European root. We also find similarities to Sigurd's snake in the eye in both Greek and Irish myth, ranging from preternatural wisdom in childhood to a worm residing in one's head. In Homeric hymn 4 to Hermes, we find the baby Hermes walking within hours of his birth. He quickly matures to invent the lyre and steal his brother Apollo's cattle. Both gifted in lyric song and cunning mischief, Hermes certainly parallels with Sigurd when he used prophetic verse to eloquently convince his brothers to go to war. Also, in Irish myth, the character Cian is born with a worm hidden in a cyst on his face. When the worm is accidentally released from its pus chamber, it grows to immense size, essentially into a giant serpent or dragon. Eventually, it is revealed that Cian's life is connected to this worm. When the worm is slain, he also dies. These tales of dragons and serpents also find more parallels with ancient Greek myth, such as the Hydra, the Dragon of Hesperides, and Python, to only name a few. Worms pervade Indo-European mythology, but Sigurd's snake in the eye stands alone in his deformity, which proves his vaunted lineage of the Volsungs. With the influence of later medieval romances upon the sagas during the time of their writing, certain common motifs found in Arthurian legends and French Romantic literature are present in some of the sagas. But in the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, we find that these influences are few and can also be explained by comparing the saga to older Indo-European oral traditions. If we consider the Saga of the Volsungs and the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok together, as they are found in the manuscript, we see that it is only in the second half of the Saga of the Volsungs that these medieval romantic patterns are found in great proliferation. Courtly matters between Sigurd Fafnirsbane, Brunhild, Gunnar, and Atli feel this part of the Saga of the Volsungs, instead of the more Norse themes of dragon slaying and magical cows with moos that are so loud they frighten entire armies away. In the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, the motifs are also much less evident. I argue that we can consider it to be a fairly good representation of the oral tradition from which it sprang from, being far closer in thematic composition to the first half of the Volsung saga and reflecting an abundance of Indo-European mythological motifs. With the rise of Viking narratives, reiterations in pop culture in recent years, the myths and sagas of the Norsemen have been skewed for modern audiences, causing misinterpretation of many aspects of Norse culture. However, the Scandinavians of the Viking Age were not all raging, bloodthirsty berserkers and fair damsels in distress. Their culture was multifaceted and extremely complex, just as any modern culture. It is only through careful examination of the literature and oral traditions that we can come closer to understanding early medieval cultures and their perspectives on subjects childhood, deformity, and magic, as well as their connections to the wider Indo-European traditions. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate listening in.